Oh, darling, it all went terribly wrong.
Google wants to release 32 million mosquitoes into California and Florida on purpose. It's been all over the internet. But before you reach for the bug spray, there are 3 things that are worth getting straight here, because most of the coverage has consistently got at least one of these things wrong.
Please like the video, comment, and subscribe for fascinating science news.
Google is seeking federal approval to release up to 32 million good mosquitoes in California and Florida. The Debug program is being reviewed by the EPA, and public comments will be accepted through Friday. In the first year of the project, 16 million bugs would be released into Florida. And in the second year, another 16 million in California.
So, straight up fact number 1, the mosquitoes are all male. Bit of a sausage fest in the mosquito community there. Male mosquitoes don't bite, only the females do. So none of those 32 million mosquitoes will be coming for your ankles or for the sole of your foot. My God, that's painful when they bite there. Straight up fact number 2 is not actually Google, not exactly. The work is actually being done by a company called Verily. Yay, Verily. They're a separate company under Google's parent Alphabet. So basically Google, but not really. We'll be coming back to that because there's some entanglement to unravel. Straight up fact number 3, and this is the big one. Contrary to what a lot of people seem to think, these mosquitoes are not genetically modified. That actually does matter because there's a near identical story about engineered mosquitoes also in California and Florida, but it's about a completely different company. So I'll untangle that later, but for now, hold on to that. So having got through the straight-up facts to correct certain misconceptions, let's ask a straight-up question. Just why are they doing this? Why?
But what's it for?
The case 4 is kind of straightforward. The mosquito is routinely called the deadliest animal on Earth. Not the shark, not the snake, not the humans. Actually, it's the humans. The humans are the deadliest animal on Earth. But next, or if we don't count the humans, then the mosquito is routinely the deadliest animal on Earth. Because the diseases that mosquitoes carry kill hundreds of thousands of people a year worldwide, apparently. In the United States specifically, the West Nile virus is associated with maybe 120 deaths a year. To combat these mosquito injuries, the existing tools are wearing out. Mosquitoes are developing resistance to insecticides, the same way that bacteria develop resistance to antibiotics. And clearing standing water only works if you find every last puddle, which they never do, of course. So Verily's pitch, in their own words, is stop bad bugs with good bugs. I'm trying to keep this report balanced with the for and the against and so on, but yeah, might find that a bit difficult at certain points. Anyway, so another straight up question. What's the science behind all of this? Here's how the so-called good bugs work. The released males carry a naturally occurring bacterium called Wolbachia. When one of the mosquitoes mates with a wild female, the eggs simply don't hatch. Fewer eggs hatch, fewer mosquitoes next generation, and the local population falls. That's the idea. Wolbachia already infects more than half of all insect species. It doesn't infect humans. There are no chemicals, no toxins, and, probably worth repeating, no genetic engineering involved. The underlying idea has been around for a while. It's called the sterile insect technique. Flood an area with sterile males so that the females mostly mate with duds. Steady now, it has one success behind it. There's a flesh-eating livestock parasite called the screwworm, which was wiped out of the US by the 1960s using exactly this method. Sterile males released in overwhelming numbers until the population collapsed. That success is a big part of why people keep trying it. But what Verily adds is scale. The historic bottleneck was always sorting the males from the biting females by hand, reliably, by the million. Verily uses cameras, machine learning, and robotics to do that sorting automatically. That's the actual innovation here, not so much the biology, but the factory floor. Verily has also done this before. Back in 2018 in Fresno, California, they released about 14 million males across a few neighborhoods. The female mosquito population dropped by roughly 95% compared to untreated areas. But there is kind of a caveat, which the headlines tend to skip. Across all of their trials, the results ranged from about 69% to 95%. It works, but it's not a guaranteed 95% every time, and it depends on releasing very large numbers. So far we've covered the optimistic version, but yeah, the obvious question.
What could possibly go wrong?
The first worry that most people have is, if you kill off the mosquitoes, don't you starve the birds and the bats and the frogs that eat them? It's a fair question, and the answer seems to be that it would have less of an impact on the birds and the bats and the frogs than you might think. So 2 reasons. First, it isn't so much an attempt to wipe out all mosquitoes. There's over 3,500 species. This targets essentially one of those 3,500 species. Second, that one species, Aedes aegypti, hope I pronounced that right, isn't actually native to North America. It's been there for a while, don't get me wrong. And that's actually a story in itself. Aedes aegypti was introduced into the US maybe 400 or 500 years ago. It bred in water barrels that were carried over from West Africa. So when you read that it arrived in California in 2013, that's not quite right. I mean, it probably is, but it's not actually its arrival in America. It's basically come back to a region that it had been pushed out of. It's been on the continent for centuries, but it does mean that nothing native really depends on it. If it can disappear for centuries and then come back, then yeah, invasive, I guess. But yeah, still troubling. If we're saying this particular case is probably fine, that's not quite the same as saying meddling with ecosystems is fine. And there have been cases where well-intended meddling with ecosystems has gone pretty horribly wrong. The clearest warning is, of course, DDT. From the 1940s, America sprayed the pesticide DDT everywhere, on crops, towns, whole forests, to kill insects. It worked on the insects, but it built up in the food chain, concentrated in birds, which in turn made the birds' eggshells so thin that the eggs cracked under the parents. It's kind of tragic. Bald eagles, peregrine falcons, ospreys, pelicans, their populations all crashed. The peregrine was effectively wiped out east of the Mississippi. In 1962, Rachel Carson wrote a book about it called Silent Spring, the silence being a spring with no birdsong. Her argument was simple. You can't wage chemical war on one set of bugs without it rippling out to everything that eats them. The book led, more or less directly, to the creation of the EPA and a ban on DDT in 1972, and the birds recovered. To be fair, DDT was a persistent poison that spread through the whole food web. Verily, sterile males are species-specific, non-toxic, and they die out within a generation. DDT is not a prediction of what this will do, but it is a reminder of how confident we were last time and how that turned out. There's a shorter version of kind of the same lesson. In Australia, 1935, cane toads were brought in to eat a beetle-damaging sugarcane. The toads couldn't reach the beetle, ignored the job, and instead bred into the hundreds of millions, poisoning native predators that try to eat them. They're still spreading. The intervention failed and became the bigger problem. Again, different mechanism, same theme. We're not as good at predicting ecosystems as we might think. It's mathematical computer models. That's always a problem. They give a false sense of confidence. There is also the human objection to this. So it's not just the animals objecting. Back to that other company that I told you to hold on to. A lot of the genuinely alarming material floating around, Jurassic Park, Playing God, billions of engineered insects, hybrid survivors, it's real. It's just about Oxitec, a British firm, not Verily. Not saying that's okay then, because it kind of isn't, but yeah, just that's a separate kind of possibly outrageous thing that's going on there. Oxitec does the thing that people rightly object to. It genetically engineers its mosquitoes. It got to Florida and California first. The first ever release of GM mosquitoes in the US was done by Oxitec in the Florida Keys back in 2021, and at far bigger permitted numbers than Verily's 32 million. So it's worth remembering that almost everything scary that you've read about GM mosquitoes in Florida actually is true. It's just about a different company. The interesting thing is that technically the two companies aren't connected. Different owners, different countries, different technology. They just look identical from a distance. It's a tech company, millions of lab mosquitoes, and the same two states. That's kind of how the stories blur. There is one interesting overlap that's maybe worth mentioning. Both Verily and Oxitec have ties to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation has funded Oxitec's work, and Gates' money is woven through the broader Wolbachia sterile insect field generally. The philanthropic World Mosquito Programme uses Wolbachia too. So while the companies don't overlap, they swim in a shared shark tank of mosquito control funders and partners. So whatever your opinion of Bill Gates, bit of an itch. That might be part of why the public mentally puts them together like that. But with that said, not genetically modified doesn't make every objection disappear. There's still that what could possibly go wrong aspect to it. When Oxitec ran its trials, residents protested that they hadn't agreed to live next to an experiment. One Florida community had already voted against it. The consent question is real, whoever's holding the test tube. Who gets to decide that your neighbourhood is the trial site? Then there's the money side of it. Verily doesn't publish a budget for this, but if you follow the ownership, and it's a mix of a Singaporean state fund, a private equity firm, a Canadian teacher's pension, and of course Alphabet, which just weeks before this application gave up its controlling stake. Verily also holds a stack of patents on the machinery, the automated rearing, the sorting of male from female, and the release. And that kind of reframes what California and Florida actually are to them. This is a company with a patented product to sell. 2 large, regulator-approved releases are a very effective way to prove that the product works before they license it to mosquito control agencies worldwide. In other words, there's a commercial angle. Of course, it's a legitimate business. Public health and profit can point in the same direction, but it's worth calling out the structure plainly. The company running the releases is also the company measuring whether they worked, and the company that profits if they did. Nobody's accusing anyone of faking results, maybe. Worth keeping in mind though, the process itself and the results are peer-reviewed, and the EPA reviews them independently. The subtler point though is about incentives. The part that nobody's paid to do is the long-term ecological monitoring, checking whether anything else in the local web shifted. That's the question with no commercial payoff, which makes it the one most likely to go unfunded. Then there's the deeper question. Should we be redesigning ecosystems at industrial scale at all? Every cautionary tale in this video has started with experts who are very confident. The counter-argument is just as real. Wolbachia is natural, the mosquito is an invasive carrier of lethal disease, and doing nothing has a body count too. In that sense, sometimes the cautious option is to act. Where you land probably says less about the biology than about how much you trust the people carrying the boxes of mosquitoes and how much you trust commercially driven scientists' track record of being sure. 32 million mosquitoes, no bites, no engineered genes, a success record, an unhappy history of good intentions, and a company with a product to sell. It's a mix. It's all a bit of a mishmash. Make of it what you will. So thank you so much for watching. My name's Maff. Please do get subscribed to Mafftopia, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, do let me know in the comments which side you land on in the debate. I could say which side I land on. I probably err on the side of not interfering, but I'd be really interested to know which side that you land on in this. Do let me know in the comments. And till next time, bye!